Keeping It Young podcast is sponsored in part by TWR360.org, giving the world powerful Christian content in more than 100 languages. Visit TWR360.org, the global internet platform of Trans World Radio. If you could find an inexpensive, user-friendly tool to help you and your church family in scheduling volunteers, think nursery workers, cleanup crews, and so forth, wouldn't you be interested in knowing more about such a tool? Finding workers and creating a perfect schedule can take an enormous amount of time, and one small cancellation can throw everything off sync. Well, a friend in our ministry built a tool for use in his local church, a tool that makes scheduling super easy. You just set up your task, you enter the volunteers, and literally click one button to automatically build a fair schedule. It considers all scheduling conflicts, vacations, and even makes sure that volunteers are fairly spread so that no one is overused. It handles all the notifications as well. It is so user-friendly that volunteers can handle conflicts simply by logging on, locating a substitute, and swapping with another user, and the program handles the approval and updates everyone's schedule automatically. It's really quite amazing how you can go from a new blank schedule to a fully populated, fairly balanced schedule in one click. And I imagine this could save you or someone at your church a lot of time. Our friend built this program for his own church, but it was so well received that other churches began using it as well. It's now available to you. It's called The Church Crew. Pay them a visit at thechurchcrew.com. It's completely free to try it out and see how powerful it is and how it can help your church family. Again, that's thechurchcrew.com. And when you visit them, thank them for supporting us here at the Keeping It Young podcast. Welcome to Keeping It Young podcast, conversations about marriage, family, and ministry life. I'm Dave.
And I'm Bethlie.
And we are the Youngs.
Welcome.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us again today. Last week, we ended with some questions and answers. And we wanted to do one more episode of question and answers because we've gotten quite a few recently. I mean, it's been a while since we've done an episode with just question and answers.
Right. And I'm looking at our notes right now because he said we're going to do one more, but we have 5 questions. And
I meant one more podcast.
One more episode.
One more episode, one more podcast.
Well, I just mean, can we get all 5 of them in one episode?
Well,
That's what
it depends
wondering.
on how long you talk, I guess, So I'm going to put the responsibility there on you.
Oh, okay.
Because we would know that I would never be long-winded. So I never give long answers. So we're safe to go there.
Okay.
But we are glad you joined us today. And honestly, if you have questions for us, we would love perhaps to address those on a future episode. Reach out with your questions. And not only will we answer them to you personally, it may be a question we can use on our podcast.
Right.
And so we would love to hear from you in that regard.
And I will say that if it's something that you don't want us to broadcast on
That's
the podcast,
valid.
then you just say that. And obviously some of them are very personal and we would already know that. But sometimes people will say, hey, I have this question, but could you not answer this on the podcast? And we understand.
And when people say that, we understand that and we always honor that. So if you want that, then tell us. Otherwise, you may hear us answering your question publicly without calling your name. Of course, we would never do that.
No.
But these are seasonal, what I call seasonal questions. The situational ones is, this is something we're facing. Can you help us? Seasonal questions are the idea. This is where we are right now in this season of life. Can you help us? Mm-hmm. And maybe there's not a great deal of difference in those, but that's how I separate them for me.
Right.
And so here's a good one that we've answered recently. That we thought might be helpful. And just simply this: what do you do when you feel like your children are being bullied? And in this particular question, it was at a Christian school.
Right.
And I know bullying is a huge issue today.
It is.
When our ministry, for a while, we did this public school outreach with one of our staff evangelists. And when we would go to public schools, we would do these illusion shows, and we would often ask the administration, the principal, whoever was in charge, what should we speak on? We would do a show and then have a few moments of speaking. And what should we speak on? And almost always they ask us to speak on bullying. And I don't know if that's just a cultural norm or the idea of it itself is a cultural norm. Mm-hmm. And I know it's, very popular, I feel like I'm being bullied. And I've noticed even sometimes when you watch different, videos on Instagram or stuff like that, there are these political situations now in which people are yelling, "You are bullying me." And it's because, you're asking questions that they can't answer, or they don't like the answer. They feel pressure. But we're talking about a legitimate situation when you feel like your children are being bullied. You feel like, someone is really harassing your children. They're putting pressure on them. They're talking down to them. What would you say is a good answer for our audience? What do you do if you feel like your child is being bullied?
Well, I would investigate the situation. I would, it could be that your child is being a little overly sensitive. So, kids can be mean one day and best friends the next. So I would investigate and really find out what's going on. And then if it is a true situation where this child has actually been asked to back off a little, maybe you've had your child, you say to them, hey, just say to them, hey, back off a little bit, or hey, what's your problem? Or, how can we solve this? What's going on? If your child has maybe said those things to the other child and it hasn't taken care of it, it may be a situation where you as a parent need to step in and go to the administration of the school and just give them a heads up and say, hey, this is what's going on. Nothing has happened. Now, obviously, if something physical has happened, the school should already know about it. But if it's words that are flying, maybe something that's being said on social media, go to the administration. And in this culture, they do take that very seriously. And steps should be taken to get that other child into the office, maybe talk with his parents, maybe calm things down in that way. And then I would say if that does not take care of it, you may need to take your child out of that school.
Absolutely. I would, just kind of summarize those. You said we should investigate.
Yes.
And you investigate by asking your kid detailed questions to get, exactly what's happening, what's being said, where, when, why.
Right.
Maybe even are there other witnesses involved?
Right.
And even perhaps even going to a teacher or an administrator or a principal or a pastor and sharing your concern, you're investigating.
Right.
So you investigate it because you're trying to get all the facts. And then I would say you not only investigate, you educate. And by that, you teach your child how to handle things. And some people, sometimes we as Christians can get a little weird about it. Well, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. Well, he did when you were being persecuted for righteousness' sake, but it doesn't remove the fact that it is okay, biblically speaking, to protect oneself.
Right.
And it's okay to respond in a way that solves a situation. It's not a matter of just grin and bear it, or grit and bear it. There may be a situation in which you need to educate your child. This is how you respond. This is what you do. This is how you handle that.
Right.
And if it's a situation where it needs more education, then study, figure out, read, get help. So you investigate, you educate, and then you can go beyond that. You communicate.
Yes.
And it may be a matter of you have to say to a teacher, I'm going to ask you to do this.
Right.
And if at all possible, always have witnesses when you do that. Have someone there who is more of a neutral party.
Right.
So that if something were to ever happen, you have evidence and witnesses to say, this is what we took, these are the steps we took, this is how we handled it. And then Bethlie's right. Sometimes you do have to just isolate. You just have to say, you know what, we're leaving this situation and we are removing our child, our kid from this situation. That's a very good question.
It is a very good question.
Any other thoughts you would have for that?
It's very difficult, as David was saying before, in this culture where people, if you ask them a question they don't like, they can say, well, you're bullying me. So you just have to be very careful. But obviously, you don't want your child to be pushed around at school or made fun of in a way that just is very demeaning to them, especially if it's happening day after day. That's just very hard. So I would just go through those steps, investigate, educate, communicate. And then also, there's nothing wrong with giving your child a little bit of confidence. Maybe everybody else in the class is really, really good at kickball at recess. Do they even play kickball anymore? I don't know. I might be dating myself there. But maybe everyone else in the class is really, really good at it, and they're getting made fun of because they can't do it. Well, take them in the backyard and teach them how to do a few things.
Sure.
Or maybe give them confidence in other ways. Maybe your child could take a martial arts class, or maybe they could learn art and be really, really good at art.
Yeah, one of the things that's true in our culture is that peer groups can divide into cliques in which they come to this point to where if you're not like us, or you can't play basketball, or you don't have the shoes we have,
Right.
Well, you compensate for that in other ways. You can, a kid who lacks confidence in the face of a bully, maybe taking a martial arts class would help him to have confidence.
Right.
Martial arts doesn't teach you to pummel your opponent as much as it teaches you to have confidence that you can.
Right.
And it may be a matter of, if your kid's not good at basketball, maybe you should get them good at tennis or get them good at golf.
Right.
And so there's all kinds of things you can build a confidence, the confidence of your child to help them to handle the negative issues that come along with things like bullying.
True.
Okay, let's move to the second question. All right.
Okay.
How do we as families set standards for music? Now, this is a good one because music is such a huge issue in our day. Bethany and I have the unique privilege of traveling.
Yes.
And we have been in so many churches, with so many families, in so many situations inside the church. And we often, our circle would be primarily maybe the independent Baptist world.
Right.
That would not necessarily always be exclusively that, but it would certainly be, kind of the norm.
Yes.
But even in this world, which kind of the world we live in would be considered a little more conservative, even in this world, we know there's massive variety.
Oh, yes.
And then there's the question comes up, does all of our music have to be hymns? Does all of our music have to be Christian? Can we listen to, say, Rocky Top at a Tennessee football game without feeling ungodly?
Obviously, you can tell that Dave Young does not feel that that's ungodly. Okay.
How can you tell that?
Oh, because Rocky Top is almost up there with the national anthem.
It's very close.
Yes.
Very, very close. For those of us who are Tennessee Volunteer fans. And for all you Roll Tide fans out there, I know you still sing it. You just don't admit it. So how do you set standards for music in your family? That's a valid question.
It is. And the incredible thing about music is that people are so immersed in what they prefer that they almost make that their standard. Instead of seeing it as, well, this is my preference when it comes to the music that our family listens to, they see it as, well, this must be the biblical standard because this is the only thing I ever listen to and this is the only thing I ever like. So then when our children are starting to grow up and they're, they hear a song somewhere or they're watching a movie that has a cute little song in it or they're in Cracker Barrel and hear Rocky Top or whatever it is and they start kind of humming along, we can be like, no, that's not our standard. And we can take a huge step back and be alarmed at, oh no, my child is going to develop this affinity for music that doesn't meet our standards. So I think as parents, what we have to do first of all is understand that the Bible does encourage us to love music, to speak to ourselves in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, but also see that those psalms and hymns and spiritual songs leaves a huge leeway for a lot of different music.
Sure. And what we've discovered is that it's easy, moms and dads, for us to become so enamored with where we are. One of the things we try to get our children to do is enjoy some variety within the parameters of our standards. And so, sometimes we're in a group that, their church has a particular sound and anything outside that sound to them is considered taboo and wrong, maybe even sinful.
Right.
And we've tried to back off of that. I would say let's just give some guidelines here. How do you set standards? First of all, it's okay to have standards. Let's start there.
True.
It's absolutely okay. And if there's something that you are absolutely uncomfortable with when it comes to music, then you may not be even, to totally say across the board that is evil and wicked and that's why I'm uncomfortable with it. It may just be to say, you know what? I don't prefer it. For our standards, we're not going to do that. Moms and dads, that is entirely fine.
Right.
And it is also entirely fine to give your child some variety in music and some leeway so that they can enjoy music that is also conservative, that is also godly, that is also right, even though it may not always fit exactly and precisely where we are.
Right.
And we have just discovered music has been so powerful in our family. In the early days of our children's lives, we listened to a ton of Patch the Pirate. Some of you would know that music. And,
yes.
And we enjoyed that. Our children would sing those songs. All of those songs weren't necessarily spiritual psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. They were fun songs. Camp, Hookawacka Woods.
Right.
Did I say that right?
You did.
And the Mr. Slippy River Race.
Mm-hmm. That one was my favorite.
That was, always enjoyed that one too. And, we listen to those on the other end because we're playing them for the children, but we learn the songs because we hear them so much.
Yes, we did.
But filling your children's life full of music is so important. But have your standards, and then maybe be willing to admit that there can be some discussion on, is my standard the only way?
Right.
And be fully persuaded in your own mind, but don't ostracize good brothers and sisters, because what we do sometimes, I think, is our children are raised with this thinking that, those people that don't listen to our style are just ungodly, evil, wicked people who don't love the Lord. And then our children grow up and they meet somebody that loves the Lord more than they do, but has a higher or lesser standard of music. And it can really confuse our children. It's like, wait a minute, I've thought all my life these people did not love God.
Right.
And sometimes I think what happens in our children's lives is that sometimes they grow up and they meet people that we gave the impression that these were ungodly people, but they meet them and find out that, no, they love the Lord, but they're different. And sometimes it can really hurt our children because it makes them back away and sometimes go into total licentiousness. And they take their liberty way too far.
Yes.
And actually are no longer even living in accordance to anything biblical. And so Beth and I do believe that you should be fully persuaded in your family. You should communicate, you should be fair, and you should give a little bit of leeway as much as you can within the boundaries of your conscience and your convictions.
Yes.
Anything else you'd add to that?
Well, I would say that there is such a thing as evil and wicked music in our
That is
world,
true.
and we do know that, and that should not have a part in your Christian home. Even if you are very free with your music, there should be some songs that you would be very careful about your children listening to.
Do you remember when our years ago we were at a Christian ministry and we were having lunch with a ton of the staff people, and we had gone to a buffet type line to get food. And how old was our son Josh? He would have been like less than 2, probably, right?
I'm not really even sure what you're.
Well, when he was doing
referring
the
to.
one song, we had watched a
we were in
movie.
Owensboro, Kentucky, were
And,
we?
no,
we were in Tennessee.
Yeah, we were in
All
Tennessee.
right, go ahead.
And we had watched some movie, and I can't remember the song, but all of a sudden he's at a table. He can hardly even talk.
Oh, yes, we
But,
had watched The Lion King.
That was it. And he started singing some part from The Lion King.
Well, they sing that oldie song in there about in the jungle, the mighty jungle, the lion sleeps tonight.
That's
Yes,
the one.
I would
And-
break into song, but let's not.
No, go ahead. This
No,
could
no.
be very interesting. This could help our ratings or maybe hurt our ratings.
True.
But do you remember he started singing that?
Yes.
And we weren't at the table, and it was the audience was hilarious. We look back at it
Well, the other diners, yes.
because there was two reactions. There were one group of people in the room that were like, "That is so awesome that he's singing that song."
Well, and they thought it was cute because
Yeah.
he was so tiny.
But then there were other other people in the audience who it was obvious in the cafeteria or the dining room that were a little bit like, "Oh my word." and so Beth and I have always tried to be balanced.
Right.
Not all of our music has to sound, like a hymn. But at the same time, we want to be careful. We want to live by our conscience. It is really interesting that when it comes to developing music standards, specifically in the New Testament, there's 2 verses that deal specifically with music. There's other principles you can pull in. So we want to be as biblical as we can and give as much liberty as we can, and yet be wise in our approach to the Bible.
Right.
Okay, so anything else?
No, I think we
All right,
covered
then
that one.
how about this one? This is a big one. Okay, here's a big question. How do you leave and cleave
In your marriage.
in your marriage, but still honor your parents?
Yeah.
This is a huge one. And it actually was
Yeah.
asked of us recently, and this may actually take the rest of our time today. How do you leave and cleave, but still honor your mom and dad?
Well, I don't know. If you have parents like us and you have parents like our in-laws parents, then it's no problem at all, right? Yeah.
I don't think it is.
No, because we let them leave and cleave.
But there's a thinking in our culture. The question seems to often come from the idea that this umbrella of authority teaching that has been prominent in some circles of Christianity.
Right.
And it has this idea that in the family situation, the mom and dad and the grandfather and grandmother still have a realm of authority to protect you, and that you're not smart enough or wise enough, and so you should always be looking to your mom and dad.
Right.
So there is that one side of it that's actually, in my opinion, a theological error. because the idea of leaving and cleaving there is that, okay, moms and dads, we've trained our children.
Yes.
And you young couples that are listening, your parents have trained you, they've influenced you. You have now said, I do. You've made a covenant vow to your spouse.
Right.
And if I understand the Bible, at that point, God's word is teaching us for this cause a man leaves his father and mother and cleaves to his wife. What he's saying right there is that, okay, now the authority structure has changed.
Yes.
You're no longer under the authority to obey mom and dad. You are under the authority now of God in relation to your own marriage, your own family, your own home.
Right.
And we as parents, if you're listening to us and you are an adult and you have kids or if you have adult children that are married,
right,
then you have to recognize that you no longer have the authority in their life.
Right.
You can counsel, you can pray, you can talk, you can even sometimes offer wisdom. But your children are now responsible to have their own authority structure. And it's very unwise for a dad to put pressure on his son or daughter, or a mom to put pressure on her son or daughter. It is always unwise to put pressure on them to get them to do what you think they ought to do.
Right.
And just to, moms and dads, let me just stop here and tell you that if your children are grown and they are serving the Lord, they may not be in the church you would join. They may not listen to the music you would listen to. They may dress differently than you would dress, but they love the Lord.
Yes.
And they are in church, and they're hearing preaching, and they are trying to raise their family. Moms and dads, I would say celebrate that.
Absolutely.
Sometimes Bethlie and I are with parents, and their kids, maybe are less conservative than they were. And maybe they go to a church that, I'm going to just say it, that might use a different translation than they prefer.
Or different music,
or
different
have
dress.
Slightly different music, or dress a little different. And sometimes we've been with parents who are absolutely in tears about that. Like, oh my goodness, my kid is just not well and they're not doing right. But that may be a wrong way to look at it.
Absolutely.
And it's okay to say, you know what, I can't do it, I wouldn't do it. But I'm telling you, moms and dads, if your children are in church, if they're praying, if they have a Bible, if they're trying to train your children well, they may dress a little differently. They may have a little different music. They may even use a different translation. But you really ought to celebrate that. Beth and I could take you to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of parents who would give their right arm to have a child where your child is.
Absolutely.
And so be careful about that. But now you that are married, and the question is, how do we leave and cleave and still honor our parents? Okay, we kind of went on a little sidetrack there to explain some things.
Right.
So how do you, when you're married, let's say here's a couple, they're 23 and they're working through this, what would your answer be? How do you still honor mom and dad and yet make your marriage the number one priority?
Well, I would see your marriage as the new established authority, that the husband is the head of the home and the wife follows him. And so if you see that as you are a new entity and then you behave in that way, you make your decisions. It's okay to go to mom and dad for counsel. And I would say to the parents of adult children, probably your sphere of influence is going to be much broader and much more effective if you allow them to leave and cleave, so that they know they can make their own decisions. They can do what the Lord calls them to do without your interference. Then probably they will be more apt to come back to you and say, hey, we've got this big decision we're making. What would your advice be? Or what would you say about this or that? And they will ask for some wisdom from you. But if they feel that pressure from you all the time of, no, I wouldn't do it that way. Nope, I wouldn't do it that way. Hey, you shouldn't probably do that with your children. If they feel that pressure from you all the time, then they're going to separate themselves from you even more. So I would say to the young couple then, establish yourself and behave in that way. And then if you feel that the parents are being a little interfering, where they are, calling you and saying, hey, I noticed this on your social media. That really bothered me or whatever. Or, hey, you guys aren't, coming over as much as you used to. And so we've decided that you're going to have meals with us every Tuesday night. We want you to come over, and so your parents are being a little interfering. Then it may just call for a conversation. You need to say, look, Mom, We just can't do that. And I know that you may not understand that, but this is what we have decided to do. This is how we are going to raise the children. This is what we're going to do on our Tuesday nights. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful of you at all, but we have to do what God has called our family to do.
Sure. And so the idea of leaving and cleaving then, that's a command, as is honor your parents.
Yes.
So on the one hand, make sure you're leaving and cleaving.
Yes.
So you make sure that you don't let your mom become more important than your wife, or your daddy become more important than your husband.
Yes.
So leave. Make sure that your husband is the one you look to. Your husband is the one that you support, your wife. And sometimes you have to communicate in the leaving and cleaving with a parent who is maybe too involved and say to them, hey, Mom, thank you for your interest, or Mom, that may not happen again. And we handle that by proper communication. We lower our voice and we confront issues. And when we confront issues, we make it clear that this is what we're asking you to change.
Right.
And in the process of that, you honor when you say communicating through an issue can be honoring, because you're developing standards, you're setting a stage for the future.
Right.
But the way you also honor is when you do heed their advice. You don't have to obey their advice, but you seek their advice. You look.
Right.
It honors your mom and dad when you're making a very important decision to say, hey, what would you do here?
Right.
And when you're aware of them, when you do help them to have a relationship with your family.
Right.
When you do include them in things, when you do reach out to them.
Yeah.
Both are commanded. You are commanded to leave and cleave. So be your own couple and protect that.
Yes.
And if necessary, handle issues that are hindering the leaving and the cleaving.
Right.
But you're also commanded to honor. So take steps to do that. Make sure that you are honoring your mom and dad.
Yeah.
And it's not obedience. You're not
No.
looking to them now to say, what do I do? You can look to them for advice. You can look to them for support as far as, encouragement, strengthening, helping.
Right. You can spend
wisdom.
time with them. You
Absolutely.
can call them, text them, just keep them in the loop. Sometimes a parent who seems to be very interfering, it may just be that they're afraid they're going to lose contact with you.
Right.
So if you're the one that, reaches out to them and texts them or calls them from time to time or has them over from time to time, maybe that will alleviate some of that pressure.
Bethlie and I believe with all of our heart that every issue in our lives, the home, the marriage, the family, every issue can be solved by proper communication and the proper response to communication.
Right.
And so sometimes communication is a hard conversation because you have to
Yes.
deal with an issue. Well, those are best scheduled. So when you're having to deal with an issue, schedule it and say, hey, we need to have you over for dinner Tuesday night because we want to talk to you about. And that way it's scheduled. Everybody's aware of it. I learned from a man I used to work with a lot. I learned from him that it's good to just write down exactly what you were thinking you would say. And you don't have to read it necessarily, but having it in writing so that you stay on target.
Right.
And you practice biblical truths about communication there. You're honest, you're open, you're kind, you're loving, you're gentle, you're soft in your way you handle things. All of that is important. It all comes into play. So you communicate, and some of those are hard, but hard communication is easier when there's been normal communication ongoing.
Right.
And so keep the doors open between you and your family. You're not under the responsibility to obey them, but you are under the responsibility to leave, to cleave, and to also honor them.
Right.
And so there's just some practical steps on how to do that. Any final thoughts? And we'll
I
be out
would
of time.
say sometimes the pressure is felt by when it comes to in-laws or parents with a younger couple. Sometimes that pressure is only felt by one of the spouses in the younger couple. Say maybe
That's valid.
the wife is perfectly fine with the interference that her parents seem to be or pressure that they seem to be putting on their marriage because she grew up with them, she knows them, she loves them. And so it may need to start more with a conversation between the husband and the wife where the husband comes and says, look, I do feel like your mom just has a little bit more influence in our marriage than is healthy or even biblical. And so how can we solve this?
Absolutely. And that is a very valid point and really worth your considering as we get ready to sign off here today. just worth your thinking through. Make sure that your spouse is more important than your parents.
Right. You do not want that to come between you. Even if you as the wife is like, my mom's just fine. That's just how she is. Listen to your husband, or if it's vice versa, listen to your wife if she feels that your mom's a little bit too interfering, because your marriage needs that. You need to leave and cleave.
Absolutely. And once again, we're out of time. And we are so thankful.
I knew we weren't going to get through all 5.
Well, we'll have to come back and do another future question answer with these remaining questions.
Yes, there we go.
We're so happy that you've joined us today, and we hope you'll check out our Keeping It Young podcast site. There's dozens and dozens and dozens now of podcasts on there that cover all kinds of topics.
Yes.
And if we can help you in any way, please reach out. We'd love to hear from you. So thanks for listening to Keeping It Young podcast. And in the meantime, this week, serve the Lord with gladness, and we'll look forward to your joining us again next week.
The Keeping It Young podcast is a Bax 5 Media production.